It is, at the one hand, the aging, largely of the white population in the United States, and on the other hand, this growing dynamic, more youthful minority population, and especially new minorities, Hispanics and Asians. And the reason I think it's important that these are juxtaposed against each other is that this census has shown that the white population really hasn't grown that much. It hasn't grown that much because it's aging and because the fertility is lower. And if we didn't have the minority growth this decade, we would have had a much, much lower rate of growth in the United States population. The Hispanic population accounted for half or more of the growth in 18 states. And that was only the case for 9 states in the 1990s. And as far as cities are concerned and metropolitan areas are concerned, those metropolitan areas in kind of the older, whiter part of the country are benefiting more from the new minorities than Florida or Texas or California or someplace like that, because these are the places really have to sustain that growth, and they're just really aging rapidly. So the idea that we had in the state of metropolitan America that these two mega trends of decreased diversity and immigration to the United States was going along with the aging of the population, I think this census really puts an exclamation point on those two trends happening at the same time, and why the new immigrant minorities, not just immigrants, but the second and the third generation, are just really an important kind of lifeblood. In a way, they're a gift for the country this decade, because if we didn't have them demographically, we would be on the road to Japan, which has a very slow-growing, aging population. We have a lot of problems to deal with. We may have other problems, but we're not going to have those problems because we have a vital growing population. A couple of things we noticed in the census is that African Americans are leaving the cities that have the biggest concentrations of African Americans. It's almost like a black flight to the suburbs or to some other parts of the country. And it's not just leaving Chicago and Detroit, although the African Americans have left those two cities in big numbers, but also Atlanta and Dallas and Houston, growing parts of the country. The metropolitan areas are attracting lots of blacks, but not the cities. So this new generation of blacks is moving to the suburbs. I think it's a very important trend from the census, and it means a lot about what's going on in cities and suburbs. The second is that we've seen a little bit of a slowdown of the decline of whites in cities. And, there aren't too many cities where whites are moving back to in really large numbers. There are a few of them, but not too many of them. But the white losses in cities aren't as big this decade as they were last decade. And then the third pattern is almost all of these cities are getting new Hispanics moving into the city. So if you look at the city of Chicago, a place that you would normally think of as a largely white-black city, especially people talked about the mayoral election a little while ago, things might be changing there. The census has shown that only about a third of Chicago's population is white, only a third of it is African American, and the other third is some combination of Hispanics and Asians. And that's a real different picture of a city that most people have ingrained in their mind as, you know, a certain stereotype. And the suburbs are becoming much more diverse as all these African Americans and Hispanics moving to the suburbs at the same time. So it's happening in some northern cities, but even more so in the southern and western cities. In the south, they're getting huge waves of African Americans and also huge waves of Hispanics moving there. Both the cities and the suburbs in the south are benefiting from that. And in the Mountain West, for the first time, many states and metropolitan areas are getting their population growth more from Hispanics than for whites. So that's another kind of mix. So this means something different in different parts of the country. Well, you know, some of the best demographers in the country are politicians. And I assume that the staff members of some of our senator friends over on Capitol Hill keep a closer eye on these demographics than I do, at least in their own states, because they know how things are changing quite rapidly and what it means for them. And I think the big news for them is the dispersion of the Hispanic population into parts of the country where they weren't in very large numbers, or where they might have been in a tiny way are getting to be much bigger. And I'm talking about the Mountain West states and Nevada and Arizona, even Utah is getting a considerable number of Hispanics. And I think it's going to be a long time before Utah is not thought of as a primarily white state, but it's getting more diverse as well. And in the southeast, states like North Carolina and Georgia and Tennessee and Virginia are getting this influx of African Americans and Hispanics. And to politicians, I just have two words for them: Barack Obama winning in North Carolina.